Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Lashes from the Lisa Lashes School of Music, and you are listening to the LLSOM Kickstart to Your Musical Journey podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, on the Lisa Lashes podcast today, we have Donald Knox, D-Knox. Tell us a bit about yourself, Donald.
Well, what would you like to know other than I'm a music lover and an artist? I produce um, techno style from Kalamazoo, being that that's where I'm from, Kalamazoo, Michigan. So it's a sound of a bit of Detroit and Chicago combined. And I've been making music for more than 20 years. Even in my teenage years, I've been producing music, and not always techno. Before it was hip hop and rap and these sort of things. When I was in high school, I was making that kind of music. But yeah, for the past 20 something plus years, it's been pretty much techno or house music, electronic music in general. Go ahead, bro.
I was just going to say, you took the words right out of my mouth. Like, anyone who's familiar with house and techno knows pretty much that Chicago and Detroit, they're well renowned for their kind of unique takes on the genre. You've got the rawness of Detroit, you've got the kind of soulful melodic kind of sounds of Chicago. And I was just going to ask, do you think that kind of had a massive influence on you, kind of as you were making house and techno?
Yeah, because I spent a lot of time in Detroit and in Chicago with summer vacations visiting family members there. So it was my mother's way of, okay, I'm gonna have a rest from him for the summertime. Sometimes, like, I might be in Detroit for 6 weeks and in Chicago for 6 weeks, but staying with different relatives in both cities. I might be at this aunt's house who actually lives down the street from this aunt. So I had a lot of chances to meet, a lot of people and make a lot of friends. But while being in both of those cities, of course, I was listening to Jeff Mills, formerly known as the Wizard, on WJLB Detroit, and in
Fantastic.
Chicago. And in Chicago, I was listening to sorry, someone's calling. I was listening to Bad Boy Bill, Mike Hitman Wilson, Farley Jack, Master Funk, Julian Jumping Press, all their mixes, the Hot Mix 6. So I would record these tapes and I would bring them back in Kalamazoo, and then I would sell them to people during the school year because I had a lot of mixes. So yes, it definitely had an influence on my style because I was already hearing, both sides of the coin. And so, of course, when I connected with my cousin Jay after he came back to Kalamazoo, then we started producing tracks together in the Kalamazoo way.
Fantastic. I mean, there's so many kind of amazing artists that you've just kind of brought up, real pioneers of the genre. But what I wanted to kind of bring up was the fact that you yourself, you've been making techno for that long. I was going to ask about Sonic Mind Records, which is, of course, your label. There's been a steady stream of musical output coming from there since the mid 90s. I wanted to ask, what kind of inspired you to make your own label from the beginning?
Just the control. I just really don't like having people having control over me or deciding what I do, because early on I was sending out demos and a lot of people kept telling me, oh, change this or do it this way or do it that way. And I was thinking, okay, if I do it that way, then of course it fits their label. And I just, I'm more like a wolf. I really don't like to sit around and be lazy. I like to go out and hunt for mine. So having the label for me was just, that whole thrill of, okay, I'm a hustler. I know how to get out here and get things done. So that was mainly the inspiration of people not accepting the demos and the control aspect, not having someone tell you what to do.
And it's just as well too, because your sound is so unique. I remember how I first got in touch with you, asking for a kind of whether you'd be re-releasing your higher self EP, because that was kind of the first thing that I ever heard from you, or which you released way back in the 90s. So it's good to see, because of course you've got all sorts of stuff coming out. In 2009 you released the Kalamazoo EP, which was kind of like a homage to your roots, and And then, of course, recently you've released music such as Underground Railroad, which is the new track that you brought out recently this year. I think it was this month, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah, it just came out on Outer Roads, yes.
Yeah, yeah, and even in that track, you can kind of hear the kind of the roughness of the kind of Detroit sound and the kind of melodic edge of the kind of Chicago sound. So that's really cool to hear, man. So obviously, hearing so much techno, creating so much techno, DJing alongside other DJs, you've probably seen and heard it all. And what I wanted to ask next was, as an artist who's kind of been on the scene for so long, what's the biggest difference in techno that you hear today compared to techno when you first started out? So like new techno versus the kind of 90s techno.
I think one of the things I hear is the long breakdowns.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the middle of the track, the 1 minute breakdowns. Because when I was first hearing techno, I don't remember breakdowns being that long. You know, I always heard samples and tracks, and the grooves were different, but just not these long breakdowns. And also the fierceness, because it seems like maybe it was something to do with vinyl, you know, things being on vinyl or however, but it just seems like back then it was kind of more raw.
I know
And,
exactly what you mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
and feel this kind of grunge where now sometimes it just feels like some of like even these new mumble rappers, you know, like the difference of hip hop and mumble rap where it's a bit just different. You know, I'm not saying that it's bad or anything or
Mm-hmm.
it's good, but that was one of the difference. It is, you know, kind of softer.
Yeah, a bit more polished to it, you know, quite a bit more polished, like it's all kind of, you know, a bit cleaner, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, and I think techno doesn't have to be. I think it can be raw, rugged, and the dirtier, the better. Maybe you know, well, I say the funkier, the better. And you don't have to clean it up because it's not certain music. You know, this is
No.
played in the clubs or in the warehouses or sometimes outside, you know, in the forest or wherever. But or even in the clubs itself, it can still be dirty and filthy with the sound. I don't know. Somebody changed it. Somebody even slowed it down because that's another thing too. It used to be faster back then.
Uh-huh.
You know, all of a sudden it's like who slowed techno and why? You know, it's almost like slowed down to a pace if you were doing a live PA. You know what I mean? Where it doesn't have to be. Sometimes I feel like if it was at least 135 beats per minute, it was just like that right perfect pace where people could just keep dancing without getting tired. But 130 is still okay, but it's still slower, you know, if you know what I mean. So those were some of the differences I see from back then that I see now.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up because I mean, I was listening to you talked about the Wizard. I was listening to a Jeff Mills mix that he did for Radio 1 back in the 90s. And honestly, some of the tracks, they were so diabolically kind of like raw, you know? There's that real rawness. So I completely understand where you're coming from, you know? I mean, another thing that I wanted to ask as it kind of pertains to techno is that obviously being a DJ that's been going for as long as you have, you've seen so many different places, so many different clubs, you've DJed all over the shop. I wanted to ask you, what's some of your favorite places that you've ever DJed?
Japan definitely was. Singapore was really nice.
Uh-huh.
Scotland was great. Uh, Germany too, because it was always nice playing at the Ultra Cell when that was still around when Disco B had that. And I have to say Poland too, because where I'm living now, there was a point where I was only playing 2 years in Poland. Like I wasn't playing outside of Poland. I had a lot of parties.
Right.
Almost every weekend playing somewhere. And there were a lot of clubs here, which was my favorite to play at. And I would say back in the States, definitely places I played at in America were very nice too. Chicago was always good, especially playing for Davy Dave when he was doing his parties back in the days. that's where I met a lot of people like Paul Johnson and such, on a
Yeah.
lot of parties back then. So yeah, it's a few different places, but Japan was really, really nice thanks to Fumiya Tanaka, because he was the one that brought. In fact, he had brought me and Oliver Ho on over for a week to play in Osaka and Tokyo, and that was nice. And then from that, Oliver Ho and I became pretty good friends. Still to today.
Oliver Ho, of course, he's a fantastic producer, DJ in his own right.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned Japan. I wanted to ask you if you had to put a finger on what it is that you loved about Japan. If you had to like kind of come up with a bit of a summary for what it is that kind of stood out to you there as a DJ, what would you say it is? Is it the energy? Is it the crowds? You know,
Yeah, the crowd,
the
because
crowd.
I didn't see people taking drugs, and I was able to play what I want. I even dropped a Prince track in the middle of my set, and they were okay with it, and they were dancing, and so I saw that they were just really there for the music, because if they're not taking drugs and they're not drinking, this was kind of nice. So that's what I would have to say, because I don't think I could live there. It was just, especially Tokyo, it was just too much. I need to have more things chilled and kind of just relax, tone down,
Yeah.
because there it can be a bit much,
Yeah, a bit fast paced, bit relentless in terms of pace. I completely get it. And of course, you mentioned Poland, and you've been living there for ages now.
Yeah,
So you've recently started DJing back in Poland, more recently. How
yeah.
are you finding being back in the clubs?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, not all clubs. I'm just the ones that are safe, of course, and following the COVID protocols. But
Uh-huh.
so far, I've decided to make a with the club halfway night, because it's Kalamazoo is halfway between Detroit and Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a series of events in this club called FOMO Club, which is in Białystok, Poland, which is 2 hours from Warsaw. And Białystok happens to be the very first city where I played my first DJ set in Poland. So it's just kind of like, going, uh, turning the clock back in time and starting over. And the guy actually remembered all of that. And he told me the funny thing is, the club that I've decided to do this with, called FOMO, I played there before in the past because it was called Metro, but I didn't remember that I played there a couple of times because it was a different name and it looked different. But it's funny how the brain doesn't remember the exact location. So now, yeah, I'll have a series of events going on there in that club. And the other thing about that city is I'm going there for meditation retreats on the weekend. And I have a spot that I go, which is very near the club. So it's nice to put these things together. And for the time being, I will start searching other clubs over here to do the same thing, but it has to be the same way. I'm still not playing around with this COVID mess, because they dropped it, it seems like, but I'm sure it's still around, lurking or something. Just,
Yeah,
I just want to be careful.
for sure. You don't want to kind of let your guard down now,
No,
especially since we're at the position we are now, where you're finally managing to kind of DJ out a bit more, get a bit more loose. But it's good to see that clubs are accommodating your wishes in regards to COVID.
oh yeah, yeah, they were very. I said, please don't pack the club when I'm DJing. Please let it only be half people, half full. Please keep people at a distance,
Hmm.
and they they change the air every 3 or 4 minutes. So that was pretty nice that they do that.
It's
So
fantastic. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
and
really
most
good.
people wearing a mask in there. I mean, in reality, I don't know how much this is actually protecting, but at least my mind was able to relax just knowing those protocols were in place.
Yeah, exactly. Gives you a bit more peace of mind, doesn't it? So no, I'm glad to see there's so many events coming up. It sounds awesome. I might get the plane to Poland. I just wanted to ask next. We talked about obviously clubs. We talked about production. We talked about your record label. There might be a few people watching this who themselves might be interested in starting their own record label. Maybe perhaps for the same reasons that you kind of outlined. They want a bit more control over the music, control over what's being played, what they want to do. I wanted to ask: is there any kind of advice that you would give to these people who want to start off their own labels?
I would say just be yourself
Mm-hmm.
and, be true to yourself and stick to what you want to do and, have a good diet. And what I mean by diet, I don't mean just food. I mean, be mindful and watchful of everything you're taking in from people around you, the environment, the food too, of course, to your clothing, to things you're watching on TV, who you're dealing with, how much time you're spending on Facebook, Instagram, all these things, because that's part of your diet,
Yeah, like more of a kind of a spiritual diet, maybe like
Yeah.
all a kind of a cocktail of things that could kind of help give you kind of better kind of headspace, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, as you said, headspace, because there's no way I can sit here and tell someone, well, you need to go get this material, do that. No, those things are there. They can figure that out. They can just go online and, okay, what materials I need to start the label. But the better the character, the better that label is going to be, and the better the music output is going to be. So those are the things, being yourself and the diet are the main two things, and then everything else will fall in place because they will know what kind of labeling they want their label to look like. They will know what kind of music they want to put out there, and they're going to know, okay, I need a distribution company, I need a publishing company, for example. I need marketing, promotion, because I kind of feel like that's where I used to lack on that. I never wanted to really put money into promotion because I was just thought, why? But actually, yes, if you're selling a product, all companies pump money into marketing promotion. It's just the cost of doing business.
I
So
got you.
that's the advice I would give to someone. And maybe, not everybody needs to start a label, so they should really check and see if they know that they can be in this for the long run. Because are you starting a label just to, I don't know, have some fame, or maybe you think you'll have more DJ gigs or whatever, or are you actually starting a label because you just really enjoy making music and you don't care if it sells or not? Because at least with the label, if it doesn't sell, you can still keep putting stuff out. There's no one to tell you can't put this out or put that out, so that's what I would be checking,
And in that kind of way, like authenticity will always shine through, even if you don't necessarily get picked up straight away, you don't get people taking note and kind of trying to worm their way into your kind of label. It's the authenticity that makes you stand out, I'd like to think, So yeah, good advice, really good advice. Let's talk producers. So obviously worked with a lot of people. You've worked more recently with Mark Hawkins, who kind of he kind of lent his talents to your Kalamazoo EP that we mentioned earlier. Now, my question is, are there any producers out there that you think that you would love to kind of work with? Maybe just producers that you've been surfing the net and you've found some really good tunes and some good mixes and you thought, man, I'd love to work with them. Does anyone come to mind?
Mike Banks from UR.
Yes, fantastic.
I'd like to work with him. Obviously, Surgeon, because Tony and I go way back. So I would definitely like to do something with Surgeon if we'll have the chance too, because just being busy. Steve Rockmod, he's another one that I would like to do something with. We actually met in person finally when we were playing on one of Maceo Plex's events at Printworks in London a few years ago. So he's one because I enjoy his music. Also with Maceo Plex, I thought maybe we could do something together in the future. It's just the timing, when he's free or when I'm busy or when I'm free.
It don't always line up, does it? You kind of kind of work doesn't always line up with regards to what you've got going on and all sorts.
These are the guys for. Also, it would be nice to do something with DJ Bone too, because I like his music. I play a lot of it in my sets actually.
Another legend, yeah, for sure.
These guys, but first on the list would be Banks, because he's just got the, this flavor that I like.
For sure, I can kind of see the crossover with your sound and his. you're a real hero of the scene. No, I don't blame you. I'd love to, and I don't even make music. So, yeah, for sure. When I first had a conversation with you, I feel like this is worth bringing up because it was just, oh, honestly, it was so fantastic to see. You've got this fantastic home studio setup, which I'm sure that, you know, with COVID happening like it did, I'm sure the one thing that kind of it brought you was a bit more time in your studio. When it comes to your home studio, what have you got there that you just could not live without in terms of equipment or anything in your home studio, really? What do you always go to that you thought, man, I'll be lost without this?
One thing is my sequencer, because I've had it since I've started. And that's one thing. And my Yamaha DX100 keyboard, because I've had it since 93 or something like this. It was really, I think, really, really young, like just high school. I had this keyboard. So those two things I just cannot, everything else is replaceable. Because, okay, if it's a boutique, I can get another boutique. The only boutique I had trouble getting was the Roland D05. Because I guess they stopped them and no one's, not too many people have them, but I really felt I needed to have one of those just because it had all the original D50 sounds in it and plus more. And it's in a small little box. But yeah, I couldn't live without those two. And I would have to say, if it's my boutiques, the D05, the JU06, because it's just like a Juno 106, those two. Because the 909 and the 808, you can always get that, sampled or in another machine. But to have a Juno 106, for me, this is something else.
Priceless, isn't it? Completely priceless, man. Your passion for house and techno obviously clearly is strong now, if not stronger as it was back then. Let's talk records. In your mind, what's the record that you will always turn to that in your mind has just not missed a beat since it's grown older? If you had to depend on any, well, you don't even have to pick one because that is a tough question. But I'd say, what first comes to mind for you in terms of records that even now you feel are as fresh today as they were back when they were released, that you can always depend on?
Electronic wise or anything?
You know what? No, I mean, anything. Go for it.
Oh, so if it's anything, I would say Prince, from the Purple Rain days.
Fantastic.
That's timeless for me. I never get tired of listening to Purple Rain or that whole album. Stuff from like Tribe Called Quest and Busta Rhymes, for some reason, even Public Enemy, things from back then, the whole 87 to 90 or 93 hip hop. And that can be, from, like I said, Busta Rhymes, Tribe to NWA or whoever. If it comes to electronic music, then I'm going to have to say definitely Transmat, Derek King's label. I know he's having a bit of news, in media, but I'm just saying, as far as his label and the music that was coming out back then, if you listen to it today, it still sounds fresh.
Fresh.
Just like Juan Atkins stuff, just good stuff, These are my kind of go-to because this is what even things I continue to listen to today, without listening to beat. Like, okay, I can go put on a Prince album, and I know I've heard the song many times. It's like the same with some movies, like Shawshank Redemption. I can watch this movie 1,000 times and never get tired of it, for example. So those are my go-to songs that I think that, they still sound like today, like they did back then.
Absolutely, that's what makes them classics, and I'm glad that you brought up hip hop as well, because I mean, if you go back and listen to, say, like, I don't know, like the Low End Theory, honestly, some of the best stuff I've heard even to this day, you can't even touch it. A lot of the new music, in my opinion at least, you can't even touch that kind of sound. So yeah, I'm with you on that, Donald, for sure.
To be honest with you, I don't know who these new people are. Like these names. I just see Vlad TV on YouTube or something, and he's interviewing somebody, and I'm thinking, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Who is this person? Where did they come from? And they're famous. That's the thing, because I'm like, I don't know them at all, but that's so strange. People know me, It's just a weird thing. You see, like I'm famous to some people. This guy is famous to some people, but he won't know me. I won't know him. It's just the weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Different circles, different
Yeah.
circles are like fans and all sorts. I completely get where you're coming from. Yeah, well, I mean, doesn't it come back down to as well the fact that music has never been more accessible to like the public nowadays? There's so many opportunities to go out there and make music, make something new. Go to a genre that you've always loved and just try and make something out of it. I think the accessibility has a lot to do with it, and I don't know what you think about that.
Oh, it's too easy,
Too
especially
easy.
software, and they just kind of open up the market. Okay, everybody can have a $10,000 studio on your computer, on your MacBook, but still, it still comes down. They just opened up the gate, but it comes down to the individual. What are you going to do? If you have all that gear in your equipment, are you actually going to do something with it? Or if you have all this stuff on your computer, are you actually going to do something with it? So the level game is fair, but it's up to the individual. I think, yes, some people just shouldn't probably have access to these things because, or maybe the digital online could be a little bit more restrictive. Like you have to answer certain questions and prove certain things, or maybe have certain certifications to be able to put your label, on the market that way. Because yeah, if you just kind of open it and it's sort of like, okay, there's 20 different labels sounding alike. What do I pick? But it would be nice if it was sort of, all right, this way we can weed out the people that's just here for a moment or just trying to do something. Let them answer some questions. Let them, they can't like sign up right away. They have to go through a process before the label gets there. So to show some authenticity, of the label.
Yeah,
Okay.
like quality assurance almost. Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, because come on, you're just having thousands and thousands of releases coming out a week. What do you pick?
I got you. Honestly, it reminds me. There's that track Kerry Chandler released, "House is House," and he kind of goes on a bit of a rant about it, And I think he said something like 40,000 releases every day, on digital online outlets.
Right. So
Uh-huh.
that I can put my track out and I'm get. Come on, so how do you sell music in between that? It's already making it harder, but easier for somebody else to create one platform for everyone to put there, and then that person is making money.
Yeah. And then also do you think as a result of that it's harder for people to get noticed to maybe onto something, and then because of how hard it is to kind of set yourself apart, there are people who won't see the light of day and whose music won't kind of get the attention that probably they would have wanted.
Yeah, and that's then why you have to go and pay for some heavy promotion, which that's eating up a cost because that's not cheap either. Those people want a lot of money to market and promote you, and you
Sure.
probably, if I'm guessing, most of these people have a daytime job, so they're not you're tired when you get home from work. How are you going to put the proper time into marketing yourself? You just can't.
No.
As they say, you're supposed to be posting so much on Instagram per day or so many stories and all this and that. And I was thinking, I just tested it. Sometimes I tried posting every day and I saw, okay, this isn't doing nothing. And then I just started spreading them out. Oh, okay. So as long as I'm consistent, I can put something once a week and it's doing the same thing as someone putting it every day. For example, it's just that consistency of doing. But I know I certainly, even, without having a job or something, I wouldn't be able to sit there all day and sit up on Instagram and post. Like, come on. Just pay somebody else, you do it. I was gonna go in my studio or go have a walk in the woods or something. I don't know. Go downtown and have a coffee shop.
Do
But
something that you love,
yeah, do something I wanted to sit here all day in front of the computer and okay, how many likes can I get or how much attention. But unfortunately, that's the social media game. It's what you have to play to the power of it to sell more units. It's not like the old days.
I wanted to ask about that because you do raise a good point. Do you feel that maybe the social media kind of aspect of things has kind of made things far more complex than it used to be? For, let's say if you're a musician, do you think that there's a lot more pressure? Do you think it brings a lot more stress to people who are kind of wishing to get their stuff out there compared to before, you know, back when you didn't have to kind of depend on social media? Do you think that it's a lot more complicated now almost?
I think people just complicate. I think it's actually easier because you don't have to do vinyl. You can just start something online and roll with it. I think people complicate things because they overthink stuff instead of
Right.
looking at it as, okay, this is the virtual world. So the good thing is I don't have to go to the, I don't have to even go to the mastering studio and, sit there with the guy. I mean, I still could, but I don't have to because it could be done online. Then I don't have to go pick up my records from the pressing plant and then ship them out myself or send them here or send them there because it's all digital. I think it's different stresses because back then there were stresses. You just probably didn't know it was stresses because it was enjoyable. It was enjoyable for me to go pick my record up from the pressing plant and get them out there. But I'm sure I was probably under stress and not realizing it because it all seemed like fun. You know what I mean? But there was
Yeah.
no urgency if you should have something coming every month. See, because the urgency now is you got something coming often, then you can keep people's attention. So now you're not putting out quality. Where back then you could put it out and then it could be a year later before you put something else out because it was all on records and people were just going to take them anyway. You
For
see,
sure.
so this urgency, I think the social media game is definitely messed up a lot of things. It's done a lot of good because you have access to knowledge faster, but it's done a lot of bad because people just relying on that and not looking outside to do other things or other ways. It's like now I have to form everything online, and the whole weird thing of emailing instead of video calling and talking to people and you see so you can see their face. It's like that whole aspect seems to be kind of gone because more people want to email. And I always tell people, if I don't see your face or we don't talk video wise, at least I'm not doing anything with you. I won't.
Oh, I completely understand. I
Yeah,
completely
it makes no
understand.
sense, man. I'm not going to be emailing with you back and forth. And sometimes through emails, the message isn't even clear. I think he means this, what he wrote, or he's a difference. I'm an American, but someone writing from the UK, just a couple different words, or just even the meaning, the way they write it, doesn't mean the same way I'm thinking it means. It means is a different meaning behind the wording. So actually getting on the video and chatting, oh, okay, he looks like a pretty decent guy. He's not fidgeting around. He's not lying. I can see it, in his body movements. So I can also feel his energy through the lens. So I think we can do something together. Or no, something seems off by this guy. You
Yeah,
know,
there's a bit more of a human element to it. You know, like you say, there's so much you can pick up on just by having that kind of face-to-face connection. I completely get where you're coming from, and it sounds to me like what you were saying about the pace of DJing and production back then. It just felt a bit more organic, you know. So it
yeah,
was a snapshot into a time gone by, where it was a bit more organic for people.
yeah, it was more organic than because the computer wasn't involved. It was just machines. Well, we can call them computers, but it's just in a different way. Where people using Ableton, for example, Ableton has a specific sound. You can use Ableton. You can put your own samples or manipulate it so you can sound like it's a analog studio, but you have to really know what you're doing. But you can still tell, like I can still hear that computer element to it. But with the machines, they added extra noise because of the cables and improper mixing. And sometimes if you bought cheap cables and plugged them in, wasn't giving you the best sound, or people probably weren't properly mixing correctly on the mixing board itself and just making whatever, and that created a whole different kind of sound.
Now,
But
something that you just said that kind of I picked up on immediately is that, you know, how you can make things sound a certain way. Like, let's say you wanted to make something sound analog. Ian Pooley, I was watching Ian Pooley talk about this. He said basically the exact same thing as you, which is you can kind of try and imitate that sound, but to a lot of ears, it's going to sound like they know that it's not the kind of original deal. So sounds to me like that's kind of, that sounds like something that a sentiment that a lot of people share. And what I wanted to do to carry on from that, because I feel like this is a good opportunity to ask, if you're a producer or you're a DJ, right, and you want to really stand out, what is it that you would say to anyone watching this to kind of set themselves apart from the rest, to really kind of show a bit more, like, I don't know if originality is the right word, but what is it that you'd say to help people stand out?
As I said earlier in one of your questions, just being yourself.
Always authenticity, yeah?
Not even thinking about how am I going to stand out from the crowd. No gimmicks. Are you good enough to bring yourself to the table? You know what I mean? Can you just stand on your own 2 feet and just, box with Mike Tyson or something? What can you bring? What can you do? Because when you're trying too hard and all that stuff, it's not going to work. I mean, plus people can see right through it. Okay, he's obviously trying to, he's doing too much, because people will have a tendency to do too much when they try to stand out. But I think, yeah, finding your little mark, and okay, that's my little mark of the pond, or my little pebble on the beach, sand on the beach. I mean, that's what I'm going to do, and just stick with it and be true to it. And that's all you can really do, because you know how it is. If you're true to yourself, it's just going to come out. People are going to see that. They'll know. They'll say, that's Will, for example. That's what he does. That's how he does it. So the thing is, how do you get people to buy your stuff? And it's just, or be into you as a fan. You just keep doing what you do and not thinking about looking for the fan or them buying it. It's just the act of getting in the studio and making music as much as you can because you enjoy it. And then because of the enjoyment, then it's going to, it's going to start reaching, because your mind is going to start trying to figure out itself, how do I get this out to more people to hear? Because you're making it here, but how do I get it to the world? So your mind would start taking care of that anyway. But I think just the act of having your studio or your piece of gear or whatever, and then you're actively messing about on it as much as possible, but actually enjoying it. So while you're actually making the music, you really feel it. It's feeling good, and it sounds right, and you can't help but listen to it over and over and over and over.
You can't imitate that, can you?
No, you can't imitate
feeling.
That. Yeah, the feeling. That's the thing, I mean, if I wouldn't be here in Poland right now if I wouldn't just be doing what I was doing with music back then. I look at how the label brought me over here and my life here.
The journey that it's kind of resulted in, and that in itself is fantastic. Well, Donald, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been great talking to you.
Thanks, man. You too. I appreciate the interview.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of people are going to be glad to hear the message that you've kind of spread today, which is authenticity, going out there doing what it is that you love for you, and people can see that, and I think that's a fantastic message to send. Thank you very much.
Thank you, bro.